Chapter 4. Divide. Bard looked at the hopeful expressions of the people in front of him. He sent a slight glare at Ruger, who had gathered them inside. "All of you," Elvira said sternly. They hobbled inside and Bard and her looked at the entrance, hoping that the others hadn't noticed. As they entered the home and closed the doors, Kai moved to guard the yard. Bard sighed briefly and searched for Ruger. Elvira was already staring him down. "These folks be needin' some healin', dear," he said, and Elvira and Bard looked about and saw and heard the sounds of coughs, sniffling noses and hobbled injuries. Bard let out a sigh. At least the man had the decency to gather the infirm first, but this was too risky right now. Helga no doubt was watching them since they arrived from the chief, and a large group of people showing up like this at once would be suspicious. "I be broken the groups up. We will have more tomorrow. Time is of the essence," Ruger said, and Bard swallowed hard. So he had made them into groups, and how did you get them to gather and organize? She asked. Ruger showed a metal band in his hands and Elvira snatched it away. "What if Helga's men saw? I only showed it in their homes." "He did, and we all only asked to see it if we didn't trust him," a lady said. "Elvira, Helga's men are getting more aggressive. There is talk that the chief won't last through the weekend." Elvira sat down unsteadily and rubbed her eyebrows. She looked at Bard, who took one deep breath and approached. He let the leather braces show and that caused a stir. Their whisperings and mutterings were quite troublesome. It was all founded on disbelief. "Elvira," someone said, and she too sighed a weary sigh. Bard understood that if they only had the weekend, then Ruger was right to gather them this fast. Getting the injured first meant they could heal them as fast as possible for the journey. He showed one of his rare moments of foresight and wisdom. "Ruger, I want you and Kai to check on the status of the shades. Elvira and I will get to healing these folks," Bard said, and the short man bowed in a comical way before winking and heading out the door. Bard looked to Sen, who nodded and left with the man. Elvira looked at him, and he indicated to the rest of the house. Her children were at the door, watching intently. As soon as Elvira stood and looked at them, they disappeared behind the door, and Bard heard their scampering feet as they pattered off. "Come now, since it's come to this, let's get you all healed as best we can. We've got a long journey." Elvira's weary words stirred the people. "Elvira, why does this man wear the braces?" an elderly woman asked as she paused by them. The others paused and Elvira looked at Bard. "The chief in his wisdom gave 2 of the tokens that Helga is not familiar with to us. He split it so that if one of us is attacked, we still carry some token of the chieftainship. As to why he chose me, Bard here is the one who saved us from the shades and behaves more as a chief should than I could," Elvira said as she placed her hand on his shoulder. He looked up at her eyes and she grinned. "I plan to support him as the next chief, and ensure that you are all taken care of." Their worried faces relaxed and Bard wasn't sure if he should be relieved that they accepted that, or if he should be concerned that the words of him and Elvira were enough to sway them so easily. Bard helped direct them to places where he and Elvira could remedy their afflictions, and help them rest in comfort. As the task before them winded down, Elvira had him follow her to the side. "Since my brilliant fool of a husband has started this, how ready are you to begin the march?" Elvira asked. "We will know more once Kai and the others return," Bard lamented. Elvira studied him for a moment until Bard nearly started to squirm. "You put off an unsettling aura, Bard. What weighs on your mind?" Elvira asked, and Bard was a bit startled at this. Elvira chuckled, releasing the sprung tension. "It should be no surprise that since the chief asked me to assist you that I studied your aura, so that I could understand what state you are in. As chief, your energy and aura will undoubtedly affect the people's confidence and hope for survival. It was the natural thing to do." Bard released a breath he had been holding. "You surprised me. Thank you for explaining," Bard said softly. He looked at the people who were chatting anxiously with one another, or putting the sick to bed. "I worry that they could be swayed so easily by a few words." "Is that it?" Elvira asked, and Bard turned to study her face. She had a soft expression as if looking at one of her children. It was an odd experience for Bard. No doubt Ruger explained some things to them beforehand, that they would be leaving home. "If you noticed, their things are strapped to them or were set amongst the collections outside, to blend until our departure." As she said this, Bard took more notice of what they were wearing. Multiple sets of clothes were possible, or some were wrapped around their middle. They looked well ready for travel. Some sported pans under their clothes that poked out when they bent. They likely had worries about leaving when only Ruger knows what is out there at any distance. And even that is limited. To know that you were selected to be chief, and are an outsider, no doubt they saw the wisdom and accepted it. You know more about the outside world, and since you saved them from the shades, they will trust you to help them to get to our destination safely. Her words brought Bard some comfort. It certainly helped that Ruger laid the foundation and Elvira was in tune with him. He was grateful that they worked as a team, though he would appreciate it if they communicated their plans with him. Bard, you're doing it again, Elvira pointed out. He sighed. He needed to communicate with them more too. It did not go unnoticed by Bard that the people watched him work and communicate with Elvira. Perhaps he had made some hasty conclusions that they were completely satisfied with the answer. After all, actions spoke louder than words, and they wanted assurance that what they had said was true. Sunset came. Bard ventured outside to abate the growing pressure he was feeling as the orange sky reflected off the snow. A few shades lingered out in the distance, which made Bard worry. The shades' numbers were growing, and to travel with this large of a group meant they needed to also take many fuel sources and sunstones. As much as they could, Sen approached, her feet crunching on the frozen snow. Kai's head perked up as Bard looked back at her and then guided them over. Sen smiled as she ran over, her white hair sparkling gold with the light in her smile and laughter bringing a bit of merriment as they moved to climb onto Kai's furry side. Kai lifted his head, his tail thumping in pleasure as they danced around and settled on him. Bard felt the chill as his breath caught in the air and Sen's puff mingled with his. She cuddled closer to him, hiding into the fur. For a brief moment, Bard's mind wasn't on the journey and what would need to be done. He was able to enjoy the view and relax for a moment. Helga was about and on the wall. He sent a glare towards Bard and Sen. Bard felt Sen shift. He wished Helga wasn't here to ruin the sunset, but he moved away shortly after. Sen snuggled harder into him. Helga confuses me, Sen said in his ear. Bard cocked his head in surprise and confusion, urging her to explain. He keep pursuing me even though he has an obvious hatred of dryads. She answered the unspoken inquiry. Bard looked out, pondering what she had said. Her simple observation was likely lacking context and perspective. But he admitted he too lacked that context. What he could say would be way too much conjecture, so he let the statement hang in the chilled air. The smell of fires drew them out of their musings as the waning light began to dip. Posts of fires and sunstones lit around the place and Bard watched Ruger begin to light his own posts around the yard. As the sun dipped, people began to migrate to the house and Bard and Sen went inside. More people preparing for their exodus greeted them. Their lives felt heavier as he saw the young, old, feeble, and oppressed. Some youth came but had disinterested expressions, belying their disapproval to be here. Bard chose to ignore their energies and expressions. Their attitude was not his to control, as they guided the people in and established them for their healing. The youth separated themselves and seemed to be acutely aware of Sen and her whereabouts. Bard observed and was only less alert when he and Sen retired to their room. He slept by the door, just in case someone tried to get in. He was woken from a stiff slam of the door into his back. He squirmed to rise and saw some of the teens' silhouettes against the firelight. Sen roused a bit and then rose in her bed as she blinked against the light. "What do you want?" Bard asked, standing tall. "Get the dryad." She must be controlling him, one of the kids said just loud enough for him to catch it. Some of the kids at front hesitated and then tried to rush forwards. Bard grappled them around the stomach and pushed them back. Sen was fully alert at that moment. She stepped out of bed. "Stay, Sen," Bard said over his shoulder. Their noise garnered attention and the teens urged in as one. This time some slipped past Bard. Sen flipped around and smacked some in the head. Bard cringed, hoping she withheld her blow. When the teen dropped, the others froze and some retreated a few steps. "What's this all about?" Sen growled out. "It's the middle of the night. What's going on here?" Elvira's voice bellowed and Bard noted a shadow by the window that departed. "No doubt Helga put them up to this, Elvira," one of the kids said, and the others who tried to move froze in fear. More of a crowd grew and Bard signaled with his head to have the other temporary residents Stay in the other side of the building. Elvira shut the door behind her and Bard barely heard Ruger speak, meaning he was working with them. Now I want a clean answer. What happened here? Elvira said as she drew herself up and approached them. She was quite intimidating, and the kids knelt, or rather, about half of them did. Bard realized the ones who hadn't were being extra defiant. You're all being controlled by that dryad. She must have put you under one of their spells. The closest to Elvira said. Spells, Sen muttered, confused. Bard paused. He would need to explain how humans view the music and magics of her people, but not right now. He grabbed her hand to assure her, and she looked into his eyes. That's hogwash. They only control plants. Elvira said. That's not true. We saw it. Another kid said. Bard looked at the kid and then back at Sen, cocking his head to the side a bit in question. Sen shrugged. She didn't seem any wiser to what they were referring to. However, the other kids were nodding or voicing their agreement. Elvira looked at them and then at the kids. What did you see? Elvira asked. They detailed an event where they saw a girl in robes like Sen's go through the village at night and sing in a warbling tune, causing the adults to follow her. They said Holger showed it to them and asked them to catch her so he could force her to return the people she had taken. Bard and Sen sat in the doorway and Sen squirmed. Is it true? Bard asked. Sen shook her head. I'm always with you at night, she whispered back. Bard nodded a couple of times as he felt a bit silly to ask that. He should have thought that first. Elvira scoffed, but the kids defended what they had seen even more. So, even when she sleeps here all night with her husband, you still saw her outside. Elvira countered. The kids protested and Bard rose. Have you heard her sing before? It doesn't seem like what you described, he said firmly. The most defiant of the kids still protested, but Bard instead walked to his pack, procured his flute and placed it to his lips. He let the note peel out, and that hushed them. Sen jumped up and sang the same note. Bard then played a few trills, and she sang them as well. He then made a warbling cry of a bird with his flute, guessing what they heard, and Sen matched the notes, but couldn't get her voice to warble like his instrument. That noise. That's what she sang. I can't sing that, Sen chimed. It's way too hard. But, that's enough. An old man and woman came out from behind the doors. Ruger looked apologetic at them. I told you all plenty of times. There is a girl who runs around gathering us folks who want to leave. That's the signal. It has nothing to do with the dryad. And we aren't controlled, the couple said in tandem. But, that's what someone would say if they are being controlled. The most stubborn-looking kids countered. Then, Sen, tell the couple what to do. Bard said. What? Me? Bard nodded an insistent sort of nod, and she shrunk in her shoulders. Well, go back to bed, she said, her voice asking instead of commanding. Sing it. Bard said and Sen balked. You know it doesn't, just do it, he commanded a bit impatiently. Sen furrowed her brow. He could see she was exhausted, but eventually she sang it. The kids looked at the adults expectantly, but were quickly disappointed. She must have told them to disobey her, the main leader of the teens said. The others started to nod along with his idea. No one is saying you have to come with us, nor do you have to stay, Elvira said sternly. If you are going to cause this much trouble, then you can go home and follow my brother instead. But, Conrad, a female voice asked, and Bard saw an older-looking girl peek her head out the door. Over Ruger's efforts to keep anyone else from entering, Elvain, the oldest boy said as he looked at her. She squeezed past Ruger, who protested until Elvira gave him a look. He returned to keeping others from getting in. Sen yawned as she leaned against Bard. He shooed her into the room and closed the door behind her. But I saw the older boy, who Bard assumed was Conrad, said. Bard somewhat tuned out the discussion as he saw the shadow by the window. Since Kai wasn't alerting them, he grew worried. Thankfully it wasn't a shade, but where was Kai? He stepped to the door and avoided grabbing much attention as he creaked it open. The chill flew in and Bard quickly stepped out. He saw someone scuttle across the yard, but with their white and black clothing it was hard to follow. Kai, Bard called out. When he heard nothing, he stepped further, ignoring the snow on his bare feet. As his concern grew, he paused as he heard a familiar yawn. With a smile and a roll of his eyes, he stepped back to the door. Kai had fallen too deeply asleep. Kai, can you keep watch? Bard said. He heard a little rough as Kai began to move and stepped into a thicker portion of light. There was scuffling that moved about as if people had become aware that Kai was here. Bard, however, stepped inside, ready to refocus on the conflict and see if they could come to a peaceful resolution. It wasn't even a concern by the time he came back in. The teens had parents around them and other folks whom they thought had been controlled by Sen. Several remained defiant, however. No one is asking you to stay. If you prefer living under Holger as your chief, then leave, Bard said, breaking up the negotiations that parents tried to coerce the boys and girls to stay with them. But Bard, Elvira started. Everyone must at some point make their own decisions. The best we can do is explain the consequences as we see, and let them do what they will. It is the role of a parent and a leader to teach, but not control. The parents started to refute, saying the kids didn't have the experience, while some of the teens and young adults along with a few older folks seemed pleased at his words. Smug even. What Holger does is coercion. If we do that, then we are not better than him, Sen said as she opened the door to her room. She let out a long yawn and Bard smiled. It was an apt way to put it. Sen is right. I don't agree with Holger on how he treats the old, the weak, or the young. The way he treats those with lovers and families is wrong. Instead, I would like to have a place where people can work for their own gain, contribute as they can, and work together. They need a leader who can lead by example, so that more people can grow and not die, live and not be afraid. It takes cooperation, which is here. But what Holger enforces lets him be at the top, and enjoy what he wants along with his followers. But someone will be harmed the way he does it. If this is what you want, then please leave. You make it sound bad, but he keeps us safe, a man said firmly. He would have had you all die to the shades, if not for us manipulating him to let you have sunstones and more fire supplies. If Bard hadn't come, we would all be dead, Elvira pointed out. Still, many people seemed unpersuaded, and they gathered themselves and eventually left, after trying to get others to join them. Bard watched some leave reluctantly, and while it did bother him, if they were not united, then the journey would be more perilous ahead. But by having them leave, they were allowing a risk that Holger would force them to leave, if not attack them quicker. When the crowd died down, Bard returned to Sen, and they slept the remainder of the night.